Before we proceed, I'd like to briefly turn the meeting over to an outstanding student who will receive the President's Award tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to dais Armando Valencia from Glen Cove Elementary School.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Armando Valencia, and I am a student at Glen Cove Elementary School. It is my honor to call this meeting to an order. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, and welcome to Isleta Independent School District's meeting of the Board of Trustees. We invite you to share your comments with the board during the public comment portion of our meeting. Public comment sign-up cards show the rules for participating legally. The board may listen, but may not enter into the discussion on the issue raised. This meeting of the Board of Trustees is called to order at 6:03. We have a quorum with Charlie Bustillos, Soltero Ramirez, Richard Cuder, Mike Rosales, Connie Woodruff, Catherine Lucero, and myself, Cruz Ochoa. Who's the trustee? Oh, Trustee Cuder, will you please introduce the JROTC for this evening?
My pleasure, President Ochoa. The colors tonight are being presented by the Junior ROTC Color Guard from Parkland High School. The Color Guard commander is Cadet Ryan Westfall. The other Color Guard members are Cadet Jared de los Reyes, Cadet Mario Nájera, Cadet Adan Delgado, and the pledge leader is Cadet Virginia Torres from Parkland High School. Will you please stand for the presentation of the colors, the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance, the Texas Pledge of Allegiance, and a moment of silence. Please remain standing until the cadets have departed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in the pledge to the Texas flag. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Dr. De La Torre, do we have any recognitions this evening?
Yes, President Ochoa, members of the board, esteemed guests, we have presentations this evening. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Patricia Ayala, Chief Communications Officer, who will lead in the recognitions and introductions this evening.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent De La Torre. We have 3 recognitions for you this evening. At this time, we ask you to please come to the front of the dais for the presentations. Audience members, please remain seated until all recognitions are complete. Our first recognition is in honor of Glen Cove Elementary School 5th grader Armando Valencia, who has proven himself to be an outstanding student on campus through his involvement in numerous clubs and activities and his wonderful character. Armando's service at school is extensive. He participates in student council, robotics, spelling bee, band, and safety patrol, where he is regularly known to demonstrate kindness, responsibility, integrity, and helpfulness. But he continues his outstanding service to others outside the classroom as well. He's an altar server at his church, where he also helps train other boys interested in being altar servers. He volunteers at church bazaars, helps serve breakfast and cleans the church on weekends, and assists the parish in creating and delivering Thanksgiving baskets to families in need. School staff say Armando is an amazing role model for his peers, and we honor his service tonight with a November President's Award. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our President's Award winner, Glen Cove Elementary School 5th grader, Armando Valencia. Armando is accompanied by his principal, Margarita Mendoza. Let's hear it one more time for Armando. Our second recognition this evening is in honor of Parkland Middle School 8th grade math teacher, Michelle Sandoval Villegas, who just last month became the 6th teacher in YISD history to win Texas Teacher of the Year. Michelle was announced as the 2020 Texas Secondary Teacher of the Year during a special ceremony in October in Austin, which was live streamed at Parkland Middle School, allowing students, staff, administration, and cabinet to cheer her on in real time and witness her victory. Next month, Michelle will be honored with a proclamation at a city council meeting for her dedication to excellence, as well as her proud representation of El Paso, the district, and Parkland Middle School. With Michelle's win, Isleta ISD maintains its championship title of having the most Texas Teachers of the Year than any other district in the state of Texas. Congratulations to Michelle. So now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 2020 Texas Secondary Teacher of the Year for Parkland Middle School, Ms. Michelle Sandoval Villegas. Michelle is accompanied by her principal, Dr. Angela Reyna. Everyone, let's hear it again for our newest Texas Teacher of the Year. Our last recognition this evening is for the November Partner of the Month Award. This month's recipient has continuously been an advocate and a strong supporter of youth in the Isleta ISD community. During the month of August, this partner donated more than $2,000 worth of school supplies to help our students prepare for the new school year. 2 months later, this partner continued their wonderful generosity by donating more than $5,000 to the district to purchase 134 winter jackets for students in need for the Parkland Pre-K Center, Parkland Elementary School, Dolphin Terrace Elementary School, and Parkland Middle School. As the holiday season quickly approaches, this partner is already planning to buy and distribute turkeys and food baskets to help families in need in our district. We are extremely fortunate to have such a generous and service-oriented partner. We thank them for their amazing support to our students and families and extend our deepest appreciation for everything they do to our community. Ladies and gentlemen, help give us a round of applause to our November Partner of the Month, the Rotary Club of West El Paso. Accepting the award is the grants coordinator for the Rotary Club of West El Paso, Mr. Genaro Mir. Let's hear it once again for the Rotary Club of West El Paso. Thank you, trustees. This concludes the recognitions for this evening.
Trustee Lucero, do we have any citizens' input?
Yes, we do. We have two speakers. You each have 3 minutes to speak, and once the buzzer sounds, we ask that you please take your seat as your time has expired. Our first speaker is Silvia Ibarra regarding ARC Polar.
Hello, good evening, Dr. De La Torre, Board of Trustees. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. My name is Silvia Ibarra. I'm a parent with 2 children from Alicia Chacon, and I am also here on behalf of a group of parents from Alicia Chacon. I'm going to ask them right now if they could please, if all the parents from Alicia Chacon, please stand. Please stand. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us tonight. As you know, Alicia Chacon is a kinder through 8th grade magnet language school. It has a dual language program and a third language program as well. The school is nationally known for its programs, and it continually ranks number 1 in the district in different academic categories and in attendance. As you're aware, there are numerous outstanding issues regarding structural health and safety at Alicia Chacon, and we continue to have serious concerns as we feel that the district is not doing enough to address these issues. It's appalling to us to see how this school has so many serious deferred maintenance issues, and so we feel the district is only applying small little patches to many problems that require a complete overhaul. Case in point, We have a timeline we prepared, kind of dating back years. And with your permission, I brought a copy for each board member. With your permission, can Ms. Ortiz provide you that copy? Yes? Okay. So this timeline, you'll be able to see the ongoing issues with the school, including excessive leaks with the roof, the cracking and the shifting of the buildings, exposed and rusted plumbing. You'll also be able to see there's issues regarding inadequate air conditioning, inadequate heating, lack of working water fountains all across the school, and inadequate security. Some of these, some issues have been addressed, but there still remain so many issues outstanding. So the fact that our school needs to replace 270 ceiling tiles due to the poor condition of the roof, I think speaks to this issue. Keep in mind that there's water leaks all over the school. There's in the cafeteria. It doesn't require tiles, but there's leaks in the cafeteria as well. So, we don't understand how this continuous decay has progressed, whether it's political, whether it's because the school is in a property poor area, or because many parents of Alicia Chacon are out of the district. I mean, it doesn't matter the reasons. We're asking that the district find a solution and that you act. And whether the district keeps us at the location or decides to relocate us, all that we ask is that you all stay on track. District staff had originally told us that by February 2020, they would advise us of a solution. And so all we're asking is that you stay on track. Please don't continue to delay this. Every parent deserves to have a peace of mind that our children are safe when we send them to school. And, 4 years, it's been 4 years that the district has known of this unsafe and leaky roof. There's been funding and still has not been addressed. So we thank you for making a decision. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jaime Abitia regarding the 2019 bond election.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. De La Torre. Giving you a quick report on the outcome of the 2019 bond. There were 10,770 votes cast, meaning that in order to pass, the bond needed to receive 5,386 votes. As of election night, votes in favor were 6,234, or about 58% of the electorate voted in favor of passing the bond. The top 5 precincts in terms of the support rate for the bond were number 1, precinct 140 with 74% in the Bel Air area. Number 2 and number 3 were both in the Riverside area, precinct 135, 146. The next one was in the Isleta area, precinct 153, and the final of the top 5 was in the Del Valle area, precinct 145 with 67% of the vote. South of the freeway, as the tradition has kind of been for bonds, the bond enjoyed a large amount of support, losing only one precinct south of I-10, and that was lost 26 to 27. So for those of you that think every vote doesn't count, it does. North of the freeway, we only lost the bond in one precinct in the Hanks area, a small one in the Eastwood area, and again, for those that think votes don't count, we tied a precinct in the Parkland area, precinct 100, 126 to 126. And a very interesting stat, the bond enjoyed support across the district. There was no feeder pattern in which the bond did not receive an overwhelming majority of votes. But to underscore just how strong the support was, there was 15 votes away from winning every single precinct in the entire 55 precincts in the Isleta Independent School District. Any questions? Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Wait, I still had 50 seconds. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that became on the support of the teachers and coaches and lunch folks and bus drivers and members of the ASETA Teachers Association that worked very hard on their weekends to make sure every feeder pattern got a door knock. We had an accuracy rate of 96%, which means out of every 100 voters that went to go vote, 96% of them received a door knock from the ASETA Teachers Association.
Concludes our public input. Thank you.
Vice President? Okay. Okay. Dr. De La Torre, would you lead us through the workshop this evening, please?
Yes, President Ochoa, members of the board, the first item on the workshop agenda is an update and discussion on the Alicia R. Chacon International School. Staff will provide an update on any and all operational construction at Alicia R. Chacon. Discussion will also include the moving of Alicia Chacon, potential moving of Alicia Chacon to another facility. And this item was brought forth by Trustees Ramirez and Trustees Rosales.
Good evening, President Ochoa, members of the board, and Dr. De La Torre. As requested, we do have a presentation this evening with an update on activities at Alicia Chacon International School. We'll briefly talk about the existing structure and ongoing monitoring. We'll look at the 2015 bond program and the slated life cycle renovation projects. We'll also talk about safety and security options that have been implemented currently, as well as take a look at potential options for the future. So in this diagram, you can see in the bottom right corner, there's a red section that represents 2 classrooms where a significant crack was identified, and after a structural engineer and architect assessed it, they recommended demolition of these 2 classrooms. The areas marked in yellow represent other smaller cracks that have been identified and are currently being monitored. The one in the far bottom of the picture, a smaller yellow area, had the nurse's office, which was also repaired when we demolished the classrooms. This slide gives you a visual of the cracked classroom before demolition. It's obviously what led us to move forward after the architect and engineer determined that that was the most appropriate remedy. The picture on the right just shows progress through the work as we demolish the classroom walls. This is a picture of the existing slab that remains, as well as the exterior of the building with the CMU as yet unfinished. And here you can see the finished CMU product. The slab remains in place because it helps bolster the foundation and keeps any additional cracking from occurring in the area. It's not wise to separate that foundation from the existing building, and so it remains. It's not necessarily pretty, but it's safe and it provides support. This is a picture of the interior classroom walls. On the left is the unfinished CMU after build back, and on the right is the painted CMU and finished wall on the interior of the hallway. This is just a visual of one of the cracks and the procedure we're using right now to monitor. It looks very simple, but it's effective. It's very similar to what we use when we just put a gauge on the crack. And so we look at it every 2 weeks. We take pictures of the cracks, and then we monitor them against each other, and we also consult with our outside architect and structural engineer. With regard to the life cycle renovation projects scheduled in the 2015 bond, this is actually a picture of the website and the 2015 bond program as it was developed. The secure front entry was completed in August of 2016. The pending scope includes wireless, bandwidth, and infrastructure technology upgrades, roof replacement, I'll show you a picture in just a moment, HVAC replacement, and let me remind you that in 2015 it was like-for-like replacement of swamp coolers, no refrigerated air conversion. So even though it says HVAC replacement, we're just talking about putting newer swamp coolers on the roof. And then there were restroom upgrades. And the restroom upgrades merely are exchanges of fixtures. So it's a replacement of a sink and replacement of a toilet, but that's it. In the budgeted scope, you can just see the amounts there for safety and security, $25,000, technology, $118,000, with the replacements and renovations representing $418,000. The total project budget in the upper right-hand corner was $562,000, of which $540,000 remains on hold for this project. This work was always scheduled at the end of bond program 2015. It would be completed in the summer of 2020 for complete finish by November 2020, well within our 5-year program limitation. Obviously, when we identified cracks and other concerns, we were glad to hold this one. We've designed it, but it is currently on hold. We can still let it in the summer of 2020 and move forward with it. With regard to the roof section that was slated for replacement, it's merely this yellow section was right down the center of the school. It's the pitched metal roof. None of the flat roof, which we grade on a scale of 1 to 4, with 4 being the worst, the flat roof is a grade 3, which is obviously why you see or hear about the leaks. And so none of that work was slated in this program. I don't know why, but I can tell you that it wasn't included. So safety and security has obviously been a great concern to parents and the community. I've already mentioned that the 2015 Safe and Secure Front Entry was completed in August of 2016. In August 26th of 2019, we stationed a full-time security guard at the campus. We also added more perimeter fencing, and we added new gates that were completed by November 1st, and then we have enforced the security protocols. So during school hours, the gates are secured. You can't enter the campus as an adult without proper identification displayed at the front entry. And we've confirmed that the security cameras and the access points are both secure and operable. One other thing that I'll mention that's not necessarily related to safety and security, but was accomplished in the last fall, is with the concerns about air conditioning and the extreme heat, which we fully understand and recognize it's pervasive across the district. We added air conditioning units to every room. So we installed 18 of them and then stopped because we moved into the cold months. And the bad thing about evaporative cooling is it's not great cooling in the summer, and when it's wintertime, you get the drafts through the room. So we stopped and we covered the units that we started on, recognizing we were in the middle of October and we had our first freeze. And so then we went back and instead we put portable space heaters in every single classroom to address the cold conditions that are imminent. And actually we've already had the one freezing. So those were things that we tried to do to accommodate the heat and address the cooler days upcoming. Again, this is just a picture that shows the perimeter fencing. The yellow is what existed, and you can see it goes along the outside between the portables and on the right side that leads to the teacher parking in the back. The gates, they're harder to see, but they're at the front. And then the red represents the perimeter fencing. It's now 6-foot chain link fence that goes all the way around. So if a parent or community member parks in that visitor parking up front, they can't get past the gates and that parking with access to the campus. And then with regard to options for the future, I'm going to talk about these in very oversimplified terms. So option A, which you would consider in any business model, is status quo. Leave them at the existing campus. To do this means that we would have to stabilize all the areas of the foundation and ensure that future cracks don't occur, and those that are there are patched and fixed. It'll require additional funds. We would have to have additional funds for refrigerated air conversion. One of the problems that we've known about and that has prevented HVAC conversion or even the consideration is that the existing electrical infrastructure is insufficient to support refrigerated air. It takes a higher power load, and we won't have it there. And we don't think we can get it. All of the panels would have to be replaced. This is expensive. And then finally, that new roof. All of that flat roof section has to be replaced, and I fully anticipate when we pull that roof off, we're going to find that the substructure underneath won't support the weight of refrigerated air units. So those are the challenges with remaining at the existing campus. The next option to consider is moving them to a vacant campus. As you're well aware, we have 3 vacant campuses. Camino Real, which is not habitable except for the gym. RFK Pre-K is slated for demolition, and we're under negotiation with the city to sell it. And Ranchland Hills is vacant, but it's evaporative cooling, and it needs significant work as well. It's also probably, it would house them, but it would be tight and they would be using portables. And then finally, the third option and the only option that would provide existing refrigerated air is to move them to a campus that's already occupied, which means you're going to have to consolidate campuses. So those are the three basic options, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Soltero?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Leeper. First off, I'd like to say that I appreciate Ms. Leeper making herself available to answer just about 1 million questions, and I appreciate that. I've had the opportunity to visit with the ARC folks, the parents, and interested parties over there, and to visit the school a number of times. And I think that one of the big issues, just to state it out front and get it off the table, so to speak, is the communication issue. And that's been one of the big things that they've insisted upon, that we told them we were going to have a very open pipeline and continuous pipeline, and keeping them updated and informed and that sort of thing. I'm not sure if we failed or not, but there's a perception out there, and so I would ask that we continue to do that as much as possible, and working through the associates, working through your office, and certainly Dr. La Torre's office to get that done, and then whatever the board should be doing, we'll be glad to do that as well. The second thing is, I realize the board, if they're going to move them, if you're going to consolidate, which seems to be a very viable option, and then going out and doing the HVAC installation, that would be a good thing. But obviously, there's the issue of which school do we consolidate, and which community do we upset the most? Okay, and I understand that as well too. And it's one or two of us may have to have some painful moments if that's the election to do that. So if we stay at ARC the way it is right now, how much money are we talking about to do things like the roof and the electrical and the HVAC, the refrigerated air, and all those things that you talked about that are still outstanding? Do you have a dollar figure or an idea?
I don't, and I think if we start talking about refrigerated air conversion at that campus, we're also going to be talking about fire sprinklers. Those were $750,000 minimum per campus. Refrigerated air is expensive, and the electrical upgrade, I think, is probably cost prohibitive between the three of them.
Okay, and since you just brought something up new, can you just talk about the fire sprinklers just for a moment, please?
Certainly. So existing code says that we either have to have corridors with walls or roof to the deck, and what we've learned is that we get into some of those roofing areas to create the ductwork for refrigerated air cooling is that it doesn't go to the deck. So when the city inspects, current code says that we have to bring it to existing code today, and that requires the installation of a fire sprinkler. And we've experienced that, I believe, at Isleta Middle and Desert Air, and maybe one other school when we converted those.
Hanks.
Yes, and Hanks as well, that's right.
Yeah, and just for the ARC parents, I'd just like to make a comment that way back when we were building schools, we weren't required to have sprinkler systems and that sort of thing. As we began doing these modifications after Bond 2015, we were surprised, to say
We
the
were
least.
surprised by that, and let me clarify, those buildings were fire rated to begin with.
Right.
And we're finding only small examples when we go in and look at it where CMU may have been penetrated to put in cabling for technology. So that in and of itself, once they open that and they see that, they say, no, that doesn't meet the old code and it doesn't meet the current, so now you have to go to fire sprinklers. And they really prefer it anyway, but it doesn't mean that those rooms weren't safe and aren't fire rated to begin with.
Okay.
It's just not current code.
Yeah, I understand that. Because like I said, we've been surprised. I learned that at Isleta Middle School.
Yes.
That was a huge surprise. It was an
It was.
expensive surprise. I guess the big thing as part of the consideration is what the actual cost would be to stay at ARC, to stay at the existing location. I will tell you that Judge Chacon, who the school is named after, her family has reached out to me and has expressed a grave concern that the school not be eliminated. And at this point, I'm comfortable saying we will do everything we can to make sure that there is an ARC in this school district. whether it's at the existing location or at her future location. That needs to happen. The judge, who doesn't get out very often, she actually visited the school with her family some time back, and I was very pleased by that she was able to do that. So, the communication plan, okay, we can go back to that again. What are we going to do for the remaining portion of the school year? Is there something else that we can do to make that a little more bolder, a little more, I don't know,
So I can
comprehensive?
tell you that our commitment was, once we finished construction, so there were construction meetings every week, and those meetings were followed up with posting on the website. And then our commitment after that was, we had our meeting at the campus on September 14th, was to report once a month. And so on October 31st, I sent the monthly report. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Cadena also updates the website and sends out a weekly email every Monday. And so there,
So it's going out,
since
okay.
the rooms were demolished and built back and completed, and the perimeter fencing and the security guard, those were all commitments we made and we discussed at the meetings. Once those were done, the reporting is basically, well, we've got 18 air conditioners installed, we're covering them, but we're not going to install any more. Portable space heaters are in place, and I think those updates are being done regularly. We've always said we will not decide until, and we will notify parents by the end of February 2020, because we have many factors, not just the work we're looking at if we chose to stay there, but Bond 2019 impacts it. I mean, you have to take that into consideration, and we didn't know until last Tuesday what that outcome was going to be. So it impacts it. We're taking that into consideration. We're looking at enrollment. We're looking at facility or capacity utilization, and you have to do that for every single campus. What condition is the current campus in that we're looking at? So I know you understand that there are many factors under consideration.
Okay. I would just, one last thing, and first, Dr. Latorre, thank you very much for making sure this happened tonight. The ARC parents were very engaged in this process, and I'm grateful for Mr. Rosales also being very supportive of that as well. I would tell the parents that, you know, we will continue, I feel comfortable saying this, I will ask the district to continue to be just a fountain of information, if you will, or a pipeline of information as we learn things. I know sometimes these things go very slow, and I know when we start talking about the money and then the problems that we might encounter, it gets interesting, because we've seen these in the project since Bond 2015 was passed. I have great confidence, and this is for the ARC parents as well, I have great confidence in the leadership. Okay, I know some of you folks are unhappy about it, but I have great confidence in the leadership of the district to do things right. Okay, and so I would ask for your continued patience. When you're unhappy about something, come holler at me. Okay, or let us know. But we'll try to give you the answer. It may not be the answer you want, but it'll be an answer. So, thank you, Ms. Leeper. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Soltero. Next, we have Ms. Lucero.
I thank you for presenting us some options to start taking into consideration. I think I would like to just make a suggestion regarding communication. Potentially through Ms. Ibarra, she seems to be very engaged. Potentially she can be a representative for the parents there that can communicate either with Mr. Ramirez on a weekly basis, daily basis, whatever it is, and also maybe a direct line to somebody that is here in our administration, so that she can go report back, or somebody from the parent group. That way they have that comfort level that we definitely are an open door district, and we want you engaged, and we appreciate your engagement. I think as we go about this process, it's very important to consider the structure. If we decide to rebuild, we need to make sure that structure is safe, and I have concerns with that structure. I don't think it's going to be something that we can invest in, that we won't have a guarantee that it'll last for 5-10 years down the road, because of the way that the soils might be in that particular area. So I would just put that out there as we go about this process, and we want the parents to know that we are actively engaged in this. We are making sure that our staff is extremely engaged and coming up with options that are going to be viable. And I'm sure fairly soon here we'll have some cost estimates and some determinations as to what will be the best option for the students and parents. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank the staff for looking into this thing. I was made aware of this at a gathering, and when Mr. Sotero Ramirez and I had an opportunity to meet, I'll be honest with you, I was very surprised, and I'm going to tell you why. I represent Eastwood, and we went out to this bond that we just completed and the previous one, and we're telling the public we're going to provide a facility for our children to meet the 21st century challenges. And I know where we're at with this particular building, but I'm also very confident that it's gotten to this point, and I know that we're gonna look into this thing and make sure that we do it correctly. As far as in terms of, do we put a building, the HVAC, on a roof that cannot sustain it? That doesn't make sense. That does not make sense. Now, there's some, and I was told this directly by one of the parents, well, I don't want them to move. Well, sometimes we have to make hard decisions. The main thing that I want to leave with you parents is that we are going to look at this thing with administration leading the way, and if any questions arise, even though I represent Eastwood, I can assure you as a parent that had kids going to Isleta, I will definitely be part of whatever needs to be decided on for the betterment of our children in that part of the world, okay? You mean a lot to me, even though you may not ever see me. Is in terms of utilization, what are the numbers there, if I may ask?
About 788, 794 students, something like that.
Out of, what's the capacity? The weight capacity?
It's 792, they're right at it.
So we would have to move quite a few children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Should we, I'm very much into the security too, but I feel also that if we were to rebuild in that area, we just rebuild the junior high over on North Loop. Once you do your excavation properly, there won't be no movement. But we'll get there when we get there. But again, I'm on your side and we're on your side and we're gonna get this thing corrected. All right? Thank you.
I just wanted to mention one more thing. It's important for the parents to know that it's definitely not political or an economic reason as to why this why we're still working on Alicia Chacon and making the decisions. Most of our entire district is in the same position economically. So Alicia Chacon is just as important as any other school that we have here in the district, and we will get this done.
Mr. Bustillos?
Excuse my ignorance, but I just want to, probably the parents want to know this too, maybe. But you offered 3 options. The process, we're supposed to know in February what's going to happen. What's the process as a trustee to be able to make them comfortable, the community comfortable? How are we going to get to that process?
So I can tell you the factors we're looking at, and those include funding. It includes the existing membership.
Right.
Where's a big enough facility to fit them? What's going to happen to the students who are currently occupying that facility, whichever one it may be? Does it have refrigerated air, or is it something that's going to be under construction when we move someone to it? Ranch land was honestly a consideration, but the fact of the matter is it's not in great condition. It's structurally probably more sound. It's not in that lower valley where the soils are questionable, but it's not refrigerated air, and it's an old campus, so it's going to take some major work if it would be the one we were going to use. So it's a matter of taking all of that information and overlaying the layers and bringing back to you 2 or 3 recommendations that you can then evaluate and that we can vet with the community. But a huge factor was, is this bond going to pass? And what does it allow me to do at the other campuses? Because, quite frankly, 33% of our campuses are still evaporative cooled, or primarily evaporative cooled. So I didn't have any choices before the bond passed. Now at least I can say, well, somewhere there's going to be a campus, even if it's not currently refrigerated air.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. So, Ms. Leeper, just a couple of quick questions. when can we expect those options? Is it the February 2020, or is that when we're letting parents know? When can
February 2020 is the end of February. I don't want to say the end. The end of February, which is February 29th, is when we committed that we would let them know. This was a huge step last Tuesday. Now that we have that answer, we can move forward with giving you more details and options that are available.
Okay, so when can we expect to see the, because I
I
know
would
we're
say
going to let the parents know what
mid-January,
the
you're
decision
going to
is?
have the first set of, here are 3 or 4 viable options.
Okay, and do we have a plan in place for the rest of the year, just to make sure that the building structure is okay for? Because I'm
Absolutely.
assuming whatever decision we make will be for the next year, so.
They're actually, the parent community wants us to move them or fix this by August 20. So they want to start a new school year. That, at least that's been the commitment.
I know, but as far as the plan for the rest of the year.
So the
we
plan
have-
for the rest of this school year is that we're going to ensure this facility is safe and that the structure is sound. It is. We, the 220 or 270 ceiling tiles, we had a massive rain. It flooded the ground, it flooded the roof. We repaired it within the week. So it takes time, but we are as responsive as we can be. So we are cooling the building. We'll finish installing those air conditioning units. Then we have the heaters for the winter. We're monitoring every 2 weeks, every crack that is material, or actually the ones we're monitoring, I don't consider material. The architect and structural engineer have indicated there is no safety issue at that campus now that we've addressed those 2 classrooms. So safety and security first, comfort of the students and the educational environment second. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I would add is that we have had conversations around identifying alternatives and other options. I don't want to outline those options until I've had a chance to speak to the principals at those schools who could potentially be affected, because if we discuss it here by tomorrow, it'll create anxiety and stress, and they don't need that right now. Not until we get closer to coming before the board with a possible recommendation or possible options.
Okay. Next item.
The next item was brought forth by Trustee Rosales and Trustee Ramirez. We're asking that perhaps we take a few minutes to provide some context to this item so that staff can better understand it, because we don't want to guess as to what prompted this workshop item. So I thought I'd give the floor to Trustee Rosales, and he can articulate and kind of tell us more about this item and who's come before him and what is it that they'd like us to address or consider.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. What initiate this is I've had numerous calls regarding some of the activities out of El Paso. And so the question arises, Eastwood has got tremendous programs in the swim, cross country, and on. And we got a lot of numbers. I understand that. And as opposed to.
Wait just a second. Let them hear you so that we can.
The first time somebody couldn't hear me. So, are we okay now? So, the question arises, how much are we, and again, this is, how much are we expanding? How much have we grown in other areas? Aside from the extracurricular, the fine arts, which are very sensitive to me, the sporting events, sensitive to me. In other words, are we limiting our children because we haven't programmed enough money to send these children? Now, the inequity is Eastwood might have 40 children. Some of the other area schools might have 10 or 5 or whatever. What I am asking for is that we create a program, an approach where we're flexible enough that if we have 20 children that qualify from Eastwood or Hanks or whatever, we don't have to call you and say, how can we do this? We said currently on a little bit of change, Ms. Sleeper, what is the balance, show it as the last numbers? The general fund? Yes. Thank you. So we have a little bit of change, and I'm not suggesting we spend $100 million sending kids all over, but I'm saying that we need to make sure that we do have a plan that allows us and prevents these moments of frustrations when parents call me and they, you know, well, how many are you? We were told that we couldn't do this and we couldn't do that. A good example was, you know, our cross country at Eastwood just won state again. So we have some very committed athletes all over the district. But when the occasion arises, I feel that we should have the funds available. And you don't have to necessarily commit them, but have them available so we won't find ourselves in these particular binds every time that we need to send somebody to Lubbock, Texas, and on and on. That's my point.
Good evening. Just to kind of provide a little bit of context, I brought forth Mr. Mike Williams, our athletic director, to kind of give you a historical context as to how we derived to our preseason travel, which I think we're speaking to here.
Thank you, President Ochoa, Dr. De La Torre, members of the board. I think the best place to start when we're talking about travel is to discuss the two kinds of travel that we handle in the athletic office. The first is what you alluded to, our preseason travel, and that is funded by the district our district athletic office travel budget. And within that, we provide teams an opportunity to travel across the state, out of the state sometimes, to compete with other teams that in tournaments, meets, invitationals. And those, a good example right now is currently in the next 4 weeks, you're going to see all our basketball teams. They're going to be traveling for the next 4 weeks out of town, various places, to compete in what we call preseason tournaments. And they don't have any bearing on the district standings, and therefore we have the name preseason for them. The second type of travel is the postseason travel. And this is where teams and individuals qualify to advance to the next level of competition. And this is paid for out of a separate budget, which I call the competition budget, and that's housed in the finance office. But we still make the arrangements for the trips. You've already referenced my example, our Eastwood 5A UIL state cross-country champions just got back from one of those trips. So those are the two types of travel that we're dealing with. So in the athletic office, our goal is to try and provide opportunities for this out-of-town competition because we think it's very important for our individual teams, our individual students to see the competition that they'll be facing maybe down the road in the playoffs. We wanted to try and provide opportunities for every team, every sport at each school, and we do. And what we had to do was devise a system, a rotation, to accomplish this and stay within our budget. So in 2014, we created a travel rotation that includes every sport, every team, every school. And we divided the high schools into two groups. First one we called the group of three, and it turned out that was Bel Air, Del Valle, and Eastwood. And even though it was alphabetically, we did do it by a blind draw. The group of four is Hanks, Parkland, Riverside, and Ysleta. So each year they rotate as to the group of three, not necessarily the schools, it's the teams that rotate. There is a travel limit for the squads that we send, because we actually we have about 60 trips, and we're going to service 153 teams and over 1,000 students. So there is a travel limit, but that doesn't prevent a team from bringing extra travelers, squad members, coaches, but the campus pays for it, and there has to be room on the bus. Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Rosales, just to kind of provide you like an overall context, and so what you need to understand is that we've been operating under the same amount of budget for the past 4 to 5 years, about $170,000. Within that $170,000 budget year to year, we've been doing a 3 to 4 team rotation on various sports because we want to give all students across the district, regardless of the sport, an opportunity to travel during preseason. Please understand that postseason, if the student athlete qualifies to a postseason tournament, whether it be regionals or state, they go. That's non-negotiable. That's never in play here. What we're discussing here is preseason. Now, the other thing you have to consider is that during that time span between the 4 to 5 years, we've also added travel in golf, tennis, and cheer. So now you're adding extra teams, not to mention now we've added YILA into the mix and Valle Verde cross country. So all that is costing, and so we try to manage to give every student, regardless of what high school they represent or team, an opportunity, an equitable opportunity to participate in these preseason sports. And so that's how we're able to derive the numbers. Think of it this way: if we increase the number of student athletes that travel in a particular sport, that's more than likely going to take away from another team sport somewhere else. And the budget is always derived a year in advance, so we had to budget and plan for these travel arrangements in a year in advance, so we had to adhere to some of these guidelines. Otherwise, if we start increasing student-athlete travel in the fall, we'll be short in the spring. And so I just kind of wanted to give you that overview context as far as how we do the preseason travel.
I'm sorry. What happens to the plays and the bands and what have you? How are we budgeting that? Is it a totally different budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So that's the fine arts travel budget,
That's the
and
fine
that's
arts.
different and distinct, and this is just the preseason athletic travel budget to include all the major sports, varsity sports, YILA, now that's coming into play, and then we also have Valle Verde cross country, because they also have a varsity sport, and they travel.
You know, we unfortunately live in such an isolated area that it just requires a lot more money because everything seems to be done in Lubbock. And I've made my recommendations that we travel to the interstate direct rather than take these little 2-lane highways that are out here in West Texas and New Mexico. But I'm also addressing the fine arts thing too. Because if we're telling our children, we want you to have the best experience, and we're not providing sufficient dollars in as much as we currently have, then are we doing our children any service?
Well,
I had an individual last year call me. They had a World Series of, I think it was something like drums, or it had to do with that, and they were out looking for money. Now I'm not against a teacher or a coach getting with their friends and going after some dollars, because that shows the kids some initiative. But I want to make sure that if we have the resources, that we don't limit our children, whether it's fine arts or the sports.
So to just kind of clarify that,
Yeah.
we have limited resources, and we try to ensure that all teams, regardless of the schools, it doesn't matter if it's Parkland, Riverside, Del Valle, whatever the sport may be, boy or female, we want to give everybody equal access, okay? And what I wanted to kind of reiterate is that we're under a confined budget of $170,000, give or take, yearly. So we have to give creative. For example, I'll give you some tangible examples of what I mean. Some team sports or individual sports may go to the same place for travel for that preseason. Say it'd be Milton. If 3 teams, we take 15 per, it doesn't make sense to get 3 different buses. So what we'll do is we'll combine and consolidate 3 teams into 1 bus, so we can make sure that we have enough money to make it work, right? The other factor we got to take into account is the fact that travel has increased in cost. It's not like the travel that 4 or 5 years ago is not the same as it is today. And so those are all factors. And so we're in direct support as far as always giving access to kids, and to always say, you know, if you want to take more kids and if there's room in the bus, absolutely. But unfortunately, we got to stay within our guidelines and parameters because we have to adhere to everybody, not just to one particular sport or one particular school. But we will never deny anybody if the school's willing to upfront the money to take extra athletes. We definitely support that. If there's not enough room in the bus, then that may determine that the school needs to purchase their own bus. But if there's room, by all means, we'll fill them up. The school will then pay the difference for those extra athletes, and we will never deny kids access if the school chooses to help us fund the events. But what we cannot do is stay out of our parameters in the fall because we want to take extra kids here and there, and it adds up, and that's going to take away from some of our travel teams in the spring. So there's a reason why we try to adhere to those guidelines, because we know that our pie is only this much, and it hasn't grown, and so we got to make it work. And so that's just to kind of provide context. If you have any questions?
My only comment is grow the pie a little bit. Okay, Dr. La Torre? I don't want an answer, but I'm
No,
asking.
I mean, ultimately, that's a budget decision. So when we go through a budget development process, if the board decides that they'd like to increase the budget for athletic travel or fine arts travel, that's certainly within your authority to do that. What we're talking about here is just money.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
I got a couple questions. On the pre, what is the cap for each? Do we know what I mean, obviously there's a cap for each sport, correct? What's for football? How many kids can we take out?
The football travel cap is 52,
It's 52.
and that includes their support personnel. In other
That
words,
includes coaches, trainers,
Right.
52. Out of that 52, say if I got 52 kids and I want to take an extra 5, obviously the district's not going to pay for it. But if we have a booster that can pay for it, is that allowed?
Yes, it is.
Yes, because I was told that wasn't negotiable. So,
No.
so we can, but I just wanted to clear
Yes,
that.
sir. Yeah.
So we can. So if you got 52 kids and I can add an extra 10 and booster comes in, pays for those 10, those kids are ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The only thing, excuse me, the only thing is that we have to have room.
Right,
In other words, if we have to get another bus, that'll be more expense.
right.
Typically, our buses' capacity is going to be anywhere 48 to 54, so may require another bus and a little more money, but we don't tell them that they cannot do that.
But if my booster club can do it,
Yes, sir.
they're more than welcome to go.
Yes, sir.
Let me just interject another element to that, because that happens a lot. Typically, what you get is if Riverside High School only has 30 players on the varsity football team, what's come up often with Eastwood and Del Valle, the schools with the large programs, is that they should be entitled to your seats. In other words,
Yes.
you know, hey, they've only got 30, you include their coaches, that makes 36 or 38. That means that they're giving up 14 seats. Why can't we take their 14 seats?
Right.
You couple that with Isleta, who we happen to know has 28 players, and so it gets complicated because they're doing the math and thinking, why should I go to my boosters? I know for a fact that, you know, Riverside this year has a team of 32, Isleta has a team of 38. Give us their seats. And we can do that, but it's complicated, and it would really just depend on the board.
Well, that was my point, yeah.
Yeah, the other
It
thing
takes-
that happened recently, I know the budget has remained the same, but in 2015, is that when we entered into the exclusive deal with Nike,
Yes, sir.
where the district has covered all of the apparel? We covered the new uniforms, the new apparel, and allowed them to keep the budget that they used to have to use in addition to travel to pay for new uniforms. And that's why we were getting these concerns expressed around, my kid's been wearing the same jersey for the last 7 years, and it used to be white. Now it's this unique shade of gold, right? And so at that time we thought, yeah, let them keep it because travel is becoming more and more expensive, and we'll work directly with BSN and use a district budget to accommodate the apparel on a cycle. And so that money that otherwise would have been used for uniforms, now the schools have available to them for travel. Prior to my arrival, my predecessor did not allow out-of-state travel.
That's correct.
It was too expensive. I went ahead for good reasons and reinstated and gave all schools an opportunity, if they can secure a game out of state or across the state, that they would be allowed to go and compete. And they've done that for the first time over about the last 5 years. So we've made improvements, and we can continue to make improvements. And to Mike's point, it really comes down to, if the pie's $170,000 and we're in the budget development cycle that starts typically in February, March, and the board says, I'm interested in seeing that budget increase by 10%, you add another $17,000, 20%, another $34,000, and it can maybe accommodate some of these issues. I think there have been times where coaches have wanted to take students who don't qualify for the postseason to just give them exposure and the experience to it. And we typically don't do that. I mean, if only 5 or 6 can compete, but you've got 20 runners, we don't pay for those runners that aren't going to compete, but rather are going to sit and cheer. I wish we could, but.
And so I could just provide a little clarity. The team sports is really not an issue, Mr. Bustillos, because typically the team sports, you're going to fill up the bus, right? Even if you have 45, you're not going to have a football team of 10 adding in, right? Because typically you're going to have that one team going to that one area to play that one other team. The question here is the individual sports, the swimming and the tracks of the world.
So what is the number?
Well, it's typically 15 on, like, for example, in swimming, you get 15. 7 boys, 7 girls. As you know, in a typical meet, you can enter up to 3.
Right.
But if you do that, then you're pretty much tripling the cost for that one particular travel in that one event, in that one sport. And so I think that's where that is. And so in those cases, you will have 15 athletes, right? 14 athletes and 1 coach. You could very easily combine 3 schools. And we do that as much as possible to save costs, because we want to make sure that everybody gets a piece of the pie and everybody has access.
Right.
So we have to be creative in those ways. And unfortunately, if there is room on that bus, we by all means will fill it up and we will allow it. But if there's not enough room, then at that point, that school's responsible for purchasing a second bus, and that's where it gets costly.
Right. One more question. Who decides what teams go on a preseason, for the preseason, where they go play? When they go out of town?
Well, at the end of the year, we send out a out-of-town travel request to each coach, and they send it back to us, and they choose their tournaments.
Okay. So like right now in football, anybody can just go out of town? Any of our 7 high schools can go out of town?
As Mr. Basurto said, football, and Dr. De La Torre said, football has become relatively new to the travel scene. It's only been in the last 5 years. But schools this year in particular have already put in their requests. We have several schools that are asking for out-of-town trips. And what we're trying to do is accommodate them in a way by saying, see if you can get your opponent to play here 1 year.
Yeah, usually it's one away and, yes.
So we're trying to balance it within our teams. Yes, you can go. I know you have to travel here. If you get a travel guarantee, that makes it better. But we want to make sure that we can have a few teams that will come here first, so we can stagger it a little bit. And that's part of the scheduling process, but we've had 4 schools have already indicated they want to go out of town.
Okay.
I just wanted to say one thing, or a couple things. I think it is definitely important to keep things equitable across the board. I think it's also important to let everybody know that in some, there's always a special exception. And this year, obviously, we had the Eastwood game that
Correct.
a good part of Eastwood folks traveled out, and that was covered. So there's always an exception, potentially.
Absolutely.
If we need to look at the pie, we'll look at the pie. But I think as we go about this process, to make sure it stays equitable. So thank you.
The one thing I just kind of want to comment on is that, while I agree that cost of travel's gone up and everything's gone up, the price, and so dealing with a budget that was created 4 or 5 years ago and is kind of not changed is difficult, and I have no problem at looking at maybe raising the amount of budget. I think that removing the limits is something we should absolutely not do. It's something that we need to be careful, because when you look at a pie and say, let's make the pie bigger, that means you're making somebody else's pie smaller, because we only have so much budget in the district. And so we have to be careful that when we're looking at increasing anybody's pie for anything, where are we affecting other people? And I think you guys do an amazing job with the budget that you do have to give our students the opportunity to be able to travel out of town, to be able to face different competition outside of El Paso. And while I do see the need for maybe increasing it a little bit, I feel that we need to be very careful in how we increase it, so to make sure that we're not affecting any other programs in a negative manner.
And there are two other elements. One is, as they travel further and further from home, we start getting into that conversation around lodging and the safety and security of students when we're expecting them to play, get back on a bus, drive all night, and get back into El Paso. And we've had parents reach out to us and express their concerns, especially, I think, as Mike noted, some of the roads to Lubbock and the Panhandle can be two-lane for a very, very long time, late at night. And then the second is, and I know you've all heard this, there are times where, no offense to anybody, our buses and the age of our buses and the reliability of our buses give me a little worry. And so the more we take them out further and further, the more I think schools are opting to go with a charter company rather than risk going with a school bus, and then that's an additional cost. So what we can do maybe is give you a summary of what the fall sports look like in terms of how much was spent by each of the 7 comprehensive high schools, what it was spent on, what was our responsibility, and what did the school pick up, just so you can get a snapshot of what a typical fall looks like, because the fall's usually very expensive. And I don't quarrel with this, but I hope I get this figure right, Mary. I believe that the privilege and the honor of having sent 3 bands to San Antonio may have come in right at, on their own, $150,000, $60,000 for that weekend. And so we're not opposed to honoring our athletes or our artists, especially when they work so hard. And we were willing to drop, and we saw it coming, so we braced ourselves. Yeah, it is a good thing. It's a great thing, and we don't mind doing it. I think we've clearly established that if you're really serious about your craft, whether it be marching band, choir, orchestra, jazz, this is where you want to send your students. But it comes at a cost, and we're okay.
Dr. De La Torre, with that analysis, can we also have maybe on there which all 7 high schools from the last 4 to 5 years, who's gone to pre-season games to see who's gone out?
And where they've gone?
And where they've gone?
Football.
You want football?
You said the fall, correct?
The fall sports.
Fall sports.
You want to see fall sports?
Football.
So volleyball, football.
Football, volleyball, yes.
Football, okay.
What else is in the fall?
If that's okay.
Oh, cross country.
Cross country.
Men's
Well,
and women's.
And to Dr. De La Torre's point, Eastwood High School, back-to-back state champs. Coach McLean, great coach, but he exposed his kids to the cross-country meet in California, where they got to compete with the best in the country. And they placed 5th or 6th 2 years in a row. What that did was, when you're going up against that level of competition, once you get to state, you're ready. And noted at this week's, they went with their top 5 runners or top 25, but it's because they got to see that exposure and they were exposed at high-level competition. And in years past, you don't get to see the strong competition until you get to regional. And so Eastwood benefited, I believe, going to California to compete at those, the major event. So I can see the benefits.
Mr. Ochoa, can I ask something?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
My question, and this is probably somebody more in advertising or whatever, maybe Ms. Ayala, because thinking about getting teams to come to El Paso to reciprocate, to me, that would be good for everyone. Yes, if we could do some things like that. I think we're making advances when we build Bel Air Sportsplex. When we build, we have turf on all of our fields. We have the big screen scoreboards. I think those are all great things. And I'm wondering if there isn't some way that we can push this, advertise it, try to get it out there so that maybe people might be interested in coming to El Paso. I don't know if that would even help, but it just seems to me that that we see a lot of us going out. We don't see very many people coming in. So I don't know if that's just a comment or what, but anyway.
Especially with the facilities that we're having.
Right. I mean, we're going to have some state-of-the-art, well, we're going to have several. We already have the Eastwood gymnasium and all. I'm talking sports-wise. Bel Air, we're going to have other things that our football fields, our baseball fields, our girls' softball fields. I mean, I just feel like there should be some way that we can kind of push that and maybe go out after some things that would increase us.
I think we do. I think it's a lot like collegiate athletics. Alabama will never come to Las Cruces to play New Mexico State, but in the preseason they're open to having New Mexico State go out and play them, almost as a way to give New Mexico State some of the gate for their program and some of the exposure that Alabama gets. I think a lot of those big schools that we're interested in playing in the, primarily in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, Houston, Austin area, see it as this would benefit you to play us. It doesn't really benefit us to go all the way out to play you. You know, most of the time it's because they have an opening in their schedule and they haven't been able to fill it where they agree. But you do have to have coaches that are aggressively looking to see. And one of the things they have to do when they're the ones looking are basically agree to go out there sometimes 2 years in a row. But the caveat is that, for example, with Plano, the idea was that we went out the first year, they took the full gate. The second year when we went out to Plano, they were supposed to give us the gate. They wouldn't travel here, you know, and this is before the tragic incident, but they were willing to give us some of the gate to come out. So they'd almost rather pay than travel. But to your point, we'll keep working on it, and I do think that having good facilities, great facilities, should be enticing. I think it's less true with the Panhandle and Lubbock and maybe even, what's the other city up there? Abilene. Some of those I think are a little more willing to come. We've had New Mexico teams come down and play us before, but it's tough to get those Fort Worth, Dallas.
Dr. La Torre, we've also had the Arizona team. We had an Arizona team come and play us. We had a California team come and play Del Valle this year, last minute. So they were willing to travel down. Their concern is no different than our concern. Yeah. Their concern is budget. And they don't even have the budget either to travel, so it sometimes becomes expensive. So,
Ms. Woodruff, one thing that we have done is, for example, the McDonald's tournament, which is going to be coming up in December, you're going to see some of the top teams and players in the nation, which they provide every year that we hold at Del Valle. But we do have the support of McDonald's to help get those teams here. The second major tournament we host to get in out-of-town teams is our Southwest University Baseball Classic. Again, another partnership where they're able to make it really special and we can entice other teams to come, particularly the Arizona teams, because it's not that far of a trip. And then also we host the regional wrestling for Region 1 at Del Valle High School, which is becoming kind of a tradition. UIL is now reaching out for us to host it. So last year we put out a bid to try and host all the spring events here in El Paso to UIL, and we'll do it again this year. That would include golf, swimming, tennis. They call it the spring meet, but it's hard to wrestle it away from some of those traditional places, like you were saying, Lubbock, for example, just because of the location. But we're trying to get some of those bigger events here.
Thank you.
Mr. Sotelo?
I just wanted to make a comment. I had the opportunity to go see the regional marching band competition in Odessa, and it was just amazing. You know, we had all our fabulous schools there marching, but what was interesting to me was that the bulk of the competitors came from our big three districts here in far West Texas, and so, you know, we had 1,200 kids that I think we traveled for marching competition, which is just fabulous. And I'm glad our students had the opportunity to compete. But you know, it was just it didn't make any sense that us and the other two large districts in this area in Region 19, you know, we're having to travel to go that far. And this is not an uncommon occurrence. And so we see this year after year. I'm just wondering if we could not incentivize UIL or somebody, you know, to you know, because we're traveling a lot further than most of these folks are. So, and quite honestly, some of these schools were very small. I was amazed at how small they are. So
The issue is geography. So we're the westmost point of Texas, and our region stretches all the way to the Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think they choose typically the Odessa Midland area, because it's the meeting point for all schools. And so I think that in Lubbock, but I know the area tracked me to qualify to regionals. We've been trying to get it to be hosted here, but that would require schools from far, you know, into the middle of Texas to come all the way to West Texas for one meet. So, but we'll always keep trying.
But it was interesting to me
Yeah.
that I met some folks from Abilene. They were there to cheer for their school or whatever, and they called themselves that they're from West Texas. And I said, I'm so sorry, there's a whole lot of Texas west of Abilene. So.
Yes, sir.
One thing that we have done at the administrative level is we've really begun to organize our forces. We're finding now that what we call the Petroplex, Midland, Odessa, they're reaching more to us than they are to the Metroplex. Amarillo area is on board with us. We're starting to get Abilene. And some of the districts across the state on the east side that are in the same kind of situation we are financially and can't afford the travel. For us, it's the distance, but we're starting to group together and organize, and our voices become stronger at the state level. We're going to continue to work to try and get some of those events here.
And I appreciate that, and just Dr. Latorre and the high school folks, and you know, just it was just having the opportunity to see all our students and our band directors and our parents and stuff. It was just beyond cool. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to go to San Antonio, but it was just beyond cool, and I'm really excited for our kids, you know, to have that chance and have that opportunity. So I do like the idea of them traveling, and I wish they would all travel more, because I think there's great opportunities in that. But I also recognize, excuse me, the limitations of us doing that as well. But thank you.
One last comment. I happened to have the opportunity of going to an event Friday at Bel Air, and Charlie Garcia insisted that I go up and see that gymnasium. I tell you what,
Amazing.
if that's not a lure to get people from Lubbock and Amarillo and Midland, Odessa to come here, we could have quite a bit of input or incoming people in this vicinity. And that's it. The other one about the growing the pie, I always get some form of a comeback. The pie that I'm referring to is raising the limits or adjusting the funds, sir. Mr. Cuder made a comment about unfairness on the growing pie. I'm not into that. I'm just in there to take care of our children as far as fine arts and sports, and be equitable with all of them. Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item, the annual financial and compliance report presentation.
Sorry, that was indelicate of us, talking about sports and fine arts.
I like sports, so it's okay. Well, good evening, President Ochoa, members of the board, and Dr. De La Torre. I'm here to present the results of the 2019 financial audit. We started our process early in the spring. This was our engagement team. I am the engagement partner, but there was also a second partner that did the review of the financial statements after we completed them for review, just as part of our quality control program. Eileen Comple, Macalinto, and Alex Chive, they did all the heavy lifting. They met with your management team, with all of the staff, and so we do want to thank everyone, because we just did not focus on the finance area. We visited with the PEMS coordinators, information technology, and so we thank all of your staff for being very helpful and very responsive. As you know, the purpose of the audit is to issue an opinion on the financial statements. So you can receive 3 types of opinion, and of course they worsen as you go from right to left, and you always want to have that green light, an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. I will tell you it's not easy to get here, and you have received a clean opinion in the past, but I tell all my clients that it's not to take that for granted, because your management does work very hard to earn this unmodified opinion. So the audit begins with our risk assessment. So we're evaluating what has changed at the district, especially with your federal programs. This year you spent $57 million in federal programs. So we always focus on the big 3, IDEA B, Title I, and child nutrition. Anytime there's a change there, we're going to pick it up as a major program. In addition to the federal side, federal compliance, federal internal controls, we look at the accounts payable, procurement, human resources, payroll, as I said, also the PEMS area, because average daily attendance does drive your state aid. So we look at the key controls, test the key controls. If everything comes out favorably, then that helps us design our test work when the district closes its books after June 30th, 2019. We came back in late August, early September to perform that field work, and all to issue an opinion, again, one of the 3. So we have to fill what I like to, a very technical term, our assurance bucket, but in order to get that unmodified opinion, in addition to the internal controls, like I said before, it helps us develop our test work, but we perform substantive analytics, which is predictive analysis, not just trend analysis. We're actually looking at third-party information, corroborating the information. We inquire of management, but inquiry alone is not sufficient, so we're vouching items, we're sampling, etc., all to issue that unmodified opinion. And of course, Ysleta ISD did earn a clean opinion, no findings related to compliance and no findings related to financial reporting. In your packets, you also we did receive a management letter comment that did not rise to the level to be reported in this report, but it is for your review. The major federal programs were child nutrition, child and adult food care program, career and technical, or Carl D. Perkins. You did receive an unmodified opinion over each federal program and no control findings. And of course, I alluded to that management letter comment related to meal counts. And I believe your management has implemented certain procedures to remedy that comment and that observation. Any questions before I go into the financial statements?
Can you just talk about that right now?
Sure,
the meal count.
The meal counts, sure. So basically the meal counts has to do with the breakfast served in the classroom. It's a very manual process. All other meals are handled through the point of sale system. And so when you have a manual process, it's always open to human error. So what we did is we selected and reviewed what the Department of Agriculture had reviewed, the Texas Department of Agriculture had reviewed, and we expanded that sample. And we were able to find that in some instances you weren't overstating, in some instances you were understating as well. So the net difference brought the projected error rate down to an acceptable level where we didn't have to report a single audit finding. But we did recognize that the Department of Agriculture was doing their routine reviews that they do at all school districts. And so because it was a major program for us this year, child nutrition, we had to acknowledge that and expand our testing as well. But that was the reason why it was just a management letter comment and not a finding in this report.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, in your books, with the black covers, every governmental entity gets 2 sets of financial statements. And the first are the government-wide financial statements. This is very similar to a corporation, and it's exhibits A1 and B1. And so it reflects everything that the district owns and everything that the district owes. So I'll begin with the total assets and deferred outflows, which were a little over $1 billion. Cash and investments were $243.8 million, and the bulk of your assets are made up of capital assets net of depreciation, which are $672.4 million. You also have receivables of $56.8 million, and you have your property tax receivable of $14.8. That includes the M&O receivable that's outstanding, as well as your debt service or interest in sinking fund. You also have some amounts due from the state of $42 million, and that's because of the timing, because of your year end, your June 30th, and TEA pays out through August 31st. So that reflects what they owe you primarily for state aid. Your total liabilities and deferred inflows were a little over $1 billion, and I will tell you that it looks, these numbers, the net pension liability and net OPEB liability, are very large. You'll recall that last year, the net OPEB liability, this year it was $173.6 million. It was the first time that it was reflected on your financial statements. The net pension liability has been reflected in these statements for about 4 years now. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is not a check you're going to have to write anytime in the future. The only time that the state would have to figure this out, how they would make school districts liable for this. But remember, TRS is a cost-sharing program. So this liability is assigned to you based on your contribution. So you have your proportionate share. So again, it's not a liability like your bonds payable or capital lease payables, which are paying your principal and interest payments. So what TEA also does for first rating purposes is they always add that back when they evaluate the district's performance at this government-wide financial statement. So this is not the general fund, this is all of your funding sources. So I just want to make sure and point that out. If we were to add back the net pension and net OPEB liability, your net position would be a positive $309.3 million versus the deficit $20.7 million. Now, if we go into the general fund revenue, you'll see that it totaled $390.4 million, an increase from last year, which totaled $384.3 million. State aid makes up 69% of your revenue sources at $269 million. Property taxes, a little under $80 million. You also have other state funding at $20.3 million. Federal funding is $17.7 million, with the bulk of the federal funding being the school health and related services revenue. And then you have other local funding as well for miscellaneous collections throughout the year. And this is only your general fund, which is your operating fund that is very critical to the district. General fund expenditures were $387.7 million in fiscal year 19. Last year, they were about $3 million less. You'll see that the bulk of your funds are spent on instruction and related services, or 59%. The second largest is facilities maintenance and operations, and that's at 11%, or $44.3 million. And you'll see, and you'll know that your utilities are included in this figure as well. Instructional and school leadership were $33.7 million. So if you aggregate the green and the third item, the red, you spend about $264 million out of the 387 in instruction-related items. You have student support and extracurricular activities at $31.8 million, security monitoring and data processing at 10.6, and then general administration, I always include this at $10.4 million, or 3%. TEA evaluates general admin cost to ensure that it doesn't exceed 8%, so you're well under that threshold or that limit, that maximum percentage. Your debt service was $5.1 million, and then you have other smaller items that are less than 1%. That aggregate to the $2.1 million. I also like to show that was by functional expenditures, but then if we look at it by object, in other words, your payroll costs, utilities, etc., you'll see that instruction and related services payroll was $217.7 million, or 56% out of all of the cost. Other payroll costs were $109.7 million. All payroll costs account for 85% of your general fund expenditures. And as I mentioned before, in that facilities figure here, excuse me, I went too far. The $44.3 million includes $10.4 million of utilities. Supplies were $19.6 million, other contracted services were $10.2 million, and then capital outlay was $10.1 million, and then travel and other operating costs at $5.1 million. If we look to see how you did compared to the final budget for fiscal year 2019, you'll see that actual revenues exceeded the budgeted amounts by $14.5 million, and your expenditures did come under budget by $12.2 million. You did add to fund balance $1.1 million, and expenditures did increase, as we saw in the earlier slides, by $3.3 million from the prior fiscal year. You have an ending fund balance of $100.2 million. Within that, we'd like to look at just the unassigned fund balance. You have commitments for claims and judgments, capital expenditures, et cetera, but this is what is available for appropriations. And so if we assume or we say that you're going to continue spending at the $387.7 million, which we know that will vary, but we're just looking at it as of June 30th, 2019, this fund balance could take you 74 days if all revenues were to cease. The optimal fund balance is 90 days, and that is per the Government Finance Officers Association. TEA looks for 75 days, so you're within target for TEA's metrics. But again, you have $100 million in overall fund balance, and then this, which is available for appropriations, is a $78.2 million or 74 days. The minimum fund balance is also shown here just as a warning. If you continue spending at this level, you would not want your fund balance to go below $31.9 million. That's considered risky in the eyes of TEA as well as the rating agencies. Your child nutrition program and debt service funds are also reflected here because you do adopt a budget on an annual basis. Your child nutrition program's actual revenues were $24.6 million, and they were less than the budgeted amounts by $1.2 million. Your actual expenditures were under budget by $1.9 million, and you did increase fund balance by $800,000. You have an ending fund balance of $3.3 million. And the goal of this in the Texas Department of Agriculture also, where on the general fund you want to build your fund balance for the unknown, the Texas Department of Agriculture does not want you to have more than 3 months. So it's a fine balance to make sure that you're not making too much money with the child nutrition program, so you're well within those parameters. As far as the debt service fund is concerned, this fund pays for principal and interest, and again, it's based on the interest and sinking fund levy that you do assess your taxpayers. Their actual revenues were $38.3 million. Actual expenditures were $40.9 million, and both revenues and expenditures were well within budget. Fund balance did decrease by about $200,000, and you have an ending fund balance of $44.2 million. Now, what's different about June 30th year ends from August 31st year ends is that by the time 8/31 rolls around, you've already made your August principal and or interest payments. For June 30th, you have to turn around and make this principal payment. And it's important that you have the cash flow to make these payments, because the new levies don't start, the payments or the collections for the levies assessed in this October, you don't start to see that until December, January, and February. In February, you have another large interest payment that comes due as well. Any questions for me?
I want to thank you because you did an amazing presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Very informative. Thank you.
No further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, where are we?
At this time, Ms. Champagne will make herself available to the board to answer any questions the board may have relative to her recent work.
Good evening, everybody. You have any question that I can answer?
No? No, we're good.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. De La Torre, do you have a report for us this evening?
Yes, President Ochoa, members of the board, all of us gathered here. We need to begin with just the humility and gratitude that we'd like to convey to our community for their support on our ballot, the 2019 bond on November 5th. The approval of $425 million to begin the second phase of our work to improve, modernize, recreate, redesign facilities is really going to be a game changer for this school district. I'd certainly like to thank the volunteers and supporters who worked diligently to pass this bond, in particular Ms. Arlinda Gillette, her team, the Isleta Teachers Association. Couldn't have done it without them. You know, they gave us 110% of their effort in terms of block walking and making phone calls and sending out information, campaign information, and informational information to a lot of households throughout our community. And so with their support and the support of our community, we look forward to continuing down this journey to really reinvent the school district and provide our students the 21st century learning environment and experience that will benefit not just this generation of students, but future generations of students to come. This last weekend, the team and I had an opportunity to travel to San Antonio and take a leadership role in the Texas Urban Council of Superintendents. As the chair or the president, I was very, very proud of this school district and all of the accolades and comments that we received relative to the things that we're doing in this school district. When we looked at data, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the council, it's made up of Austin, Aldine, Brownsville, Corpus Christi, our neighbor El Paso, Fort Worth, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Isleta. And we were very well represented. We were asked to help in organizing this 3-day event and just got so many compliments from some of the biggest, if not the biggest, school districts in the state. And so I want to personally acknowledge those on my team who sit before you, who make me look good here and everywhere else. And I think the thing I took away from it was how well and how far out ahead we are in many, many areas when compared to some of the largest urban school districts in the state, not just in terms of data and test scores. Those are self-evident, but just in the way we think and the way we pursue our initiatives with an ambition and an aggression, a sense of urgency on behalf of 41,000 students and the parents who entrust us to provide them a great experience and a better quality of life in the future. So that was a great opportunity. Later this year, I'll take my place as the chair of the Texas Association of Latino Superintendents and Administrators. I was asked to do that last year, and so I've accepted that role. I think it gives our school district a stage, a platform to really share some of the great things that we're doing in our school district, especially with EL students, students with special needs, and a variety of other areas. Tomorrow we launch the annual Giving Tree. It's hard to believe it's that time again, to provide Christmas gifts for children in need at each of our elementary schools. As you know, the Giving Tree is just located outside. We invite everyone, including the trustees, to select an ornament and purchase at least one gift on a student's wish list. All gifts are due to Public Relations by Friday, December 6th. Also want to again reiterate what I said earlier. Very proud of our Fine Arts Department and the fact that we sent 6 bands to Odessa Midland, which is pretty phenomenal given that we have 7. And of those 6, 3 went on to the state. That's Bel Air, Del Valle, and Eastwood. Hanks. Who did I send to the state that didn't go? Eastwood didn't go. Hanks. And Hanks, I believe, performed the best, followed by Bel Air and then Del Valle. I don't even know why I brought it up. Hey, did you know the Eastwood High School cross country team won state for the 2nd time in 2 years? Next week, from November 18th to the 22nd, we join public schools nationwide to observe American Education Week and National Education Support Professionals Day. Together, we celebrate the fact that our nation's public schools are teaming with professionals who have dedicated themselves to meeting the needs of each and every student, regardless of circumstances. In fact, a study earlier this week ranked El Paso as the #1 city in the nation for teachers. Thank you to all public school employees and their association for your dedication to our students. And lastly, it's around the corner. I want to wish the board, your family, student staff, faculty, and administrators a happy and safe Thanksgiving holiday break. We'll return and get ready to get after it before starting the holiday season. And then 2020.
Yes, it's coming fast.
That's it. It's a blur.
Thank you, Dr. De La Torre. Next is we consider our consent items. Is there any discussion on any of the consent items or any items you wish to pull for a separate vote? If there is no further discussion, may I have an electronic motion and second on the consent items listed on this agenda as recommended by the administration?
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda items listed on this agenda as recommended by the administration.
I have a second by Ms. Woodruff. Please cast your electronic votes. All votes have been cast. Results are 7 in favor, none opposed. Next is our action items. Item number 1, canvass official election returns of the November 5th, 2019 uniform election. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? Ms. Woodruff.
I just wanted to echo the thanks that Dr. De La Torre was giving to our voters, to our learning communities, everyone who supported the vote, but especially to Ms. Arlinda Valencia, who is the one who helped do all the stuff with the teachers walking and all of that stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to give her my personal thanks for all the hard work, and the teachers and the staff and everyone who walked and shook hands and made this into the success that it was. Thank you.
Mr. Goodare.
Same thing, just want to thank everybody, especially our voters, but Arlinda, of course, our teachers union, everything that they do to get out there, it wouldn't be a reality without them, but it also wouldn't be a reality without the hard work of Dr. De La Torre and his executive cabinet. I don't know how they're still standing. I mean, they probably, everything's a blur. They went to every school. They did everything they possibly could to get voters informed. And that's the most important thing, is that when our voters went out there, they were informed of how good this was going to be for our kids, for our teachers, and for our communities as a whole. And so I really would like to thank them for going above and beyond, and they definitely deserve that upcoming Thanksgiving break because they worked incredibly hard.
I have a few words to say about this. I was very impressed of how everybody responded to support this bond, especially on Saturdays when I participated at somewhat on the Hanks Walk. I was expecting like, a handful of walkers and things. I was just amazed at how many people were there. A lot of teachers, a lot of principals, a lot of admin that are sitting here in front of us, and it was just I was just amazed at what they were willing to put the work in to go walk and tell our voters what this whole bond is about. And I commend the voters. The voters are smart. They've been in this area just as long as I have, since 1978. We know our commitment to our children is the most important thing to all of us. They are our future. They are our leaders. They're yet to come, our doctors, our lawyers, our teachers. And I think we saw their commitment to them, and I applaud them all for joining us and having this bond pass. And again, also I applaud the Teachers Association. They put in a lot of hard work. It's just amazing as to what can be done collectively, and that was proven on this past election. And thank you all again. If no further discussion, may I have a motion? Ms. Woodruff.
Mr. President, I move to adopt an order canvassing and declaring the results of the bond election held on November 5th, 2019, as provided by the El Paso County Elections Administrator on Isleta ISD Bond Proposition 1 as 6,246 or 57.91% for and 4,540 or 42.09% against, with the Isleta Independent School District Bond Proposition passing.
I have a second by Mr. Couder. Please cast your electronic votes. The results are in. 7 approve, yes, and none opposed. Thank you very much. I have a discussion on that. Yeah. Next item is the ratification of award change order number 7 to YISD contract number 201-70424 with Aero Building Corporation. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? I have a question. Okay, this change order is, how much is it?
Total changes to the contract are $1.9 million, of which 1.4 is the fire sprinkler system. So the work that includes the rusted roof jacks, the partial replacement of rusted ductwork, all of that totals just 100, or total change orders 538,000 beyond the sprinkler system.
Yeah, that portion about the roof jacks and the ductwork, that's for evaporative coolers, right?
Yes, sir. So this was a replacement of the roof, and they picked up the old units, and we're going to put them right back down on it. But when they pulled them up, then they found rusted ductwork, rusted roof jacks. So they wouldn't warranty the roof without replacing the substructure and those roof jacks and things like that.
So when we do this ductwork, and we're going to replace them with refrigerated air, do we have to go back and change those ducts?
Well, yes, it will require different ductwork than the evaporative cooling does.
This
Well,
is
if
for
we're replacing, if we're converting refrigerated air there, yes, there will be some, the evaporative ductwork will.
Wouldn't it be a smart thing to go ahead and provide the ductwork already?
Well, keep in mind, this was under the 2015 bond program, and until Tuesday, I didn't have the funding to do more.
It just means that we're putting something new, then we're gonna go back and tear it out again and put a,
We didn't replace all of the ductwork, only the place it was where it was so rusted it would leak. So we're not talking about replacing all of the evaporative ductwork in this change order, only where it connected to the unit and was rusted and would leak when they put the unit back down.
all right.
So all of the interior,
So it's because they're re-roofing that they have to move these evaporative coolers off, and then they're gonna damage the rusted roof jacks,
yes,
which are the
They're the
actually the
supports
vent
for the-
portion from the,
they support
to
the
the roof,
unit.
that connects the roof to the evaporative cooler.
Yes, sir.
And that's how much?
So that work was just 153,000, but all total change orders were 1.9, 1.4 was the sprinkler, and the remaining change orders were 538,000, about 6% of the total approved budget.
Okay. I just had a little concern about, we're going to go to refrigerated air, and now we're doing, we're working with evaporative coolers, but, okay. It's at Hanks.
Real quick, who's doing the ductwork? It's Arrow?
Arrow, yes. Well, they're the general contractor.
Okay. Our guys manufacture ductwork, don't they?
Not this ductwork, no. And this was under contract at the time, so it was already included. The roof work was already included. The roofing contractor, subcontractor is already on site. We're not gonna then send them off and say, let us come in and do this ourselves.
Okay.
How many units are we talking about?
There were 29 evaporative cooling units that were picked up with roof jacks and ductwork immediately surrounding the unit were replaced.
So we already did the work.
Yes, ma'am, because they have to put the roof back on.
We're not putting any new evaporative coolers, right?
I'm sorry?
We're not replacing the evaporative coolers.
No, these were old evaporative units that we picked up and just
They're
put
going
right
back.
back down when they finished the roof.
Okay.
So we're not replacing brand-new units when we do convert to
Right.
HVAC. These were old units picked up, put back down.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, may I have a motion? I move to ratify the award of change order number 7 to YISD contract number 2017044 with Aero Building Corporation for additional roofing work required for Hanks High School upgrades and alterations projects as shown in the agreement and contract presented. I have a second. I have a second by Mr. Kuder. Please cast your electronic votes. The votes have been cast. The results are 7 yes and none opposed. Item number 3, authorization for sale of surplus real property. Using your electronic hand, is there any discussion? If there's no further discussion, may I have a motion? Ms. Lucero.
I move to approve the adoption of the resolution for the possible sale of an inaccessible narrow strip of land on the edge of the Del Valle Middle School campus and delegation of authority to the superintendent as shown in the backup materials.
I have a second by Ms. Woodrow. Please cast your electronic votes. Votes have been cast. Results are 7 in favor, none opposed. Wait a minute. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Adjourn.